Hi, Riverview. It is nice to be here. It feels a bit like coming home. So, I think we're going to have some fun tonight. Let me show you just a little bit. This is what my normal world looks like. So I get to travel to some of these beautiful places and showcase the amazing things that God does. Getting to dive in caves in Tonga, go to these beautiful tropical islands and make some new friends along the way. So when I'm not doing that, as Tim said, I have some passions that I think are close to God's heart and speaks hopefully of God's love. I want to share some of that tonight. So I have 3 stories that I'd like to share with you, and hopefully they'll push you closer, draw you closer to what God's love looks like in 2018. So the first one is a biblical story that if you've been around church for a little while, you will know this story, but I think I can give you a slightly different take on what it's about. The second one is about a global tragedy that is happening right now today in our world, and I think deeply troubles the heart of God. And the third one is a very personal encounter that I think will touch and affect your heart and show you what God's love looks like and the outworking of that today. So let's start on the first one. If you want a title, it's called One Love, okay? So if you've got an iPad, a phone, whatever, and you want to follow along, otherwise just look to the screen. You might have one of those old-fashioned things, you know, those Bibles, pages in it. You could flick to that. It's Luke 8, 40 to 56, okay? So bear with me, I'm going to read off the screen. So, now when Jesus returned, a crowd welcomed him, for they were all expecting him. Then a man named Jairus, a synagogue leader, came, fell at Jesus' feet, pleading with him to come to his house because his only daughter, a girl of about 12, was dying. As Jesus was on his way, the crowds almost crushed him, and a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years, but no one could heal her. She came behind him, touched the edge of his cloak, and immediately her bleeding stopped. "Who touched me?" Jesus asked. When they all denied it, Peter said, "Master, the crowds are crowding and pressing against you." And Jesus said, "Someone touched me. I know that power has gone out from me." Then the woman, seeing that she could not go unnoticed, came trembling, fell at the feet of Jesus. In the presence of all his people, she told why she had touched him and that she had been instantly healed. And then Jesus said to her, "Daughter," that's a good word, isn't it? Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace. While Jesus was still speaking, someone came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue leader. "Your daughter is dead," he said. "Don't bother the teacher anymore." Hearing this, Jesus said to Jairus, "Don't be afraid, just believe and she will be healed." When he arrived at the house of Jairus, he did not let anyone go in with him except Peter, John and James and the child's father and mother. Meanwhile, all the people were wailing and mourning for her. "Stop wailing," Jesus said. "She's not dead, but asleep." They laughed at him, knowing that she was dead. But he took her by the hand and said, "My child, get up." Her spirit returned, and at once she stood up. Then Jesus told them to give her something to eat. Her parents were astonished, but he ordered them not to tell anyone what had happened. So you know the story. If you've been around church a little while, you've heard it. And it is an amazing story about Jesus raising someone from the dead, the miraculous. But I would say to you, this is actually a love story that explains the very heart and soul of who Jesus is. So let me give you a little context. This is when Jesus was at the height of his notoriety, the height of his fame, and the height of his ministry. He had been doing these amazing things. People had heard of it, and crowds had come out expecting him. So this made the royal wedding a few weeks ago look like a small garden party. Everyone was there, okay? So, and then you've got Jairus. Now, Jairus is this synagogue leader. He is the guy that gets to decide, you preach, you pray, you read the scriptures. That's an important role. He was the big guy in society, held on high. So here he is at his house, And other commentaries would say that doctors couldn't heal his daughter. Jairus could afford, he had tried everything and nothing would work for his daughter. He's there with crowds of people because he was an important person. And he's tormented. Can you imagine? This is a father's love. He's desperate for his daughter. And at the same time, he has no more hope. His only hope is to find Jesus. Now, Jesus is in this massive crowd somewhere over there. So he's torn. Does he leave his daughter and go and do that? Or does he stay by her side? Can you imagine when Jairus decided to leave what people there said? What an awful father. He doesn't have love for her. Why would he leave his daughter in the hope of somehow finding this teacher, this Messiah, and then somehow convincing him to come with him back to his home, and then somehow, hopefully, he'll heal her? But see, Jairus took a risk, and that's part of this narrative, that you and I, we get told, we get conditioned that our world should be that we have a comfortable home, that we have a comfortable job, that we have a comfortable mortgage and a comfortable car and a comfortable holiday and a comfortable life. That's not the story of Jesus. Jesus challenges us time and time again to take a risk. And in that risk, as Jairus did, we discover his love. So Jairus goes off, and the first thing he does when he finds Jesus, now remember, he is a very, very important person in Jewish society. He throws himself at the feet of Jesus. Now, this is a big moment, because if this doesn't work out, he's embarrassed. His reputation could be shot. Everyone's watching this. The crowds have gathered, but he does that. He throws himself at the feet, and Jesus sees the one person. Imagine, in thousands and thousands of people, lots of them would have been pleading with him. He saw Jairus, and he said, I'll come with you. He changes his plans. So he goes there. On the way there, then this woman who would be a bit of an outcast in Jewish society, she would be considered ceremonially unclean. She wouldn't be able to go to synagogue, and she wasn't that welcome. She's not the person you would hang out with because she had this affliction. So she goes there and she's trying to hide in the crowd. Unlike Jairus, who threw himself, she comes up quietly behind him, touches his cloak, and immediately is healed. Now, this is a really, really important part of understanding God's love, because we can get this part wrong, because it says, Jesus said, who touched me? And we read it at times like that. Was it you? Was it you? Was it who touched me? In this accusative sense. It wasn't that at all. Jesus came with this gentle spirit and said, who touched me? Now, this is the King of Kings, Lord of Lords. He knows who touched him. He knows, but there's a purpose to why he did this. So finally, when this lady recognises that she can't hide, she comes before everybody, and that was the point. She came before everyone and said, I did. This is why I did it. And then he uses that beautiful word and he says, daughter. This is the hand of God reaching out saying, daughter. Now that means we're connected. Daughter means I love you. Daughter means you're part of my tribe. And everyone saw that, and he said, your faith has healed you. Go in peace. From that day forward, see, it wasn't about accusing, it was about setting free. In that moment, Jesus set her free. Everyone knew that she was now part of society and set free. So they go to the house of Jairus. And on the way, just as he's finishing that conversation, someone comes and says, your daughter's dead, don't bother coming. Now, there's a debate in the commentaries whether it was the same person, or there is talk that it might have even been Matthew that said, don't bother the teacher anymore. Don't bother him. So that gives me a bit of hope, because when I'm having a bad day and I question my faith and I'm feeling gripped and challenged, people who walked right there with Jesus did the same thing. So don't feel bad when you have those days, because we all have those days, right? He gets to the house and he says, everyone's there mourning. He says, don't do that. She's just asleep. What do? They mock him. They mock him. So there's a lesson that when we step out in faith, people will criticise. Go and ride your bike around the world in places like Siberia. People will criticise. They'll say, that's foolish, that's foolhardy, that's careless. But when you step out, you will expect criticism. That's what happens. So he goes, and he goes in, and again, listen to the language that he uses. My child, we're connected. I love you. I'm reaching out my hand. You are part of my tribe. And instantly she gets up. And what does Jesus do as the last thing in this story? He could have run back out. I felt like it, didn't it? You go, they were laughing at, they were mocking. Oh, come outside. Hang on, let's get this on Facebook Live. Let's show the story. Huh? You mocked me and look what happened. But Jesus doesn't do that. He humbly says, don't tell anyone. Okay? So there's 4 points in that story that I think God is trying to tell us and will make sense in the next 2 stories. One is about this deep father's love, my daughter, my child. The second one is that we are challenged to be risk takers. That's how we change history. The third one is that God has this incredible love for the one, the woman that came, Jairus, the daughter, that in those sea of people, he identifies the one who's desperately seeking him. And finally, in all of that, Jairus threw himself before Jesus. The woman, when she was identified, threw himself before Jesus. And Jesus himself said, don't tell anyone. Let's not make a big deal of this. He was humble about it. So the second story is one that is very close to my heart, because tomorrow morning, globally, there's going to be 650 million people who will wake up and not have access to clean, fresh water. That's 10% of the world's population. That is horrific, and I don't think this is part of God's plan. Here is an awful statistic. 1 child dies every 90 seconds from a lack of water or water-related disease. Now, if that was Australia, if that was America, if that was Europe, it would be front page news, yeah? We would be horrified. We would be up in arms. It would be on 24 news cycle, day in, day out, till we fix that. But this is Africa, so it gets forgotten. And I don't think that that is part of God's plan, because you see, this is a Maasai warrior's wife, and that is her 4-day-old baby. And she loves that child just as much as you and I love our children. Now, that baby had about a 50% chance of surviving because of water-related disease. If that baby dies, she mourns just as hard as you and I mourn. She grieves just as hard as you and I, and God grieves just as much. So this is not part of the plan. So we have this global tragedy around water, which is also an environmental issue, because tomorrow, if it rains in Africa, people will rejoice and they will survive and live for a number more days. I recently did a survival course, and one of the things that was about surviving in the Australian outback, the desert, and one of the things that they taught us was that no one in modern history, in recent history, has died in the Australian bush from starvation. Nobody, which I found a little fascinating. Lots of people have perished from a lack of water. You can live for about 3 to 7 days at the most with no water. And in some cases, people had died within a day from a lack of water. So this is an enormous environmental issue. Now, you might say, this won't happen here. This won't happen. You know, that's Africa. It's remote. It's isolated. This is Cape Town in South Africa. It is not unlike Perth geographically. It is a modern, sophisticated city. And when I was there in October last year, it was the first modern, sophisticated city in history that was about to run out of water. So I treated myself, because this was the end of 9 months in a tent and, you know, in a swag and roughing it on the side of the road in Siberia and some wonderful places. So I treated myself and stayed at a nice, really nice hotel. And they were asking me while I was there, please only have a 3-minute shower and please only flush the toilet once a day. That's a reality of Cape Town in 2017. They narrowly avoided this crisis, but it hasn't gone away. Now, if you live in Cape Town and you are wealthy, you're middle class, upper class, wealthy, if Cape Town ran out of water, someone will sell you water, yeah? Someone will truck it in, they'll ship it in, because there'll be a business and a profit, and you will survive. If you live in the north of Cape Town, where some of the struggling areas are, you don't have that luxury. You can't just afford to buy water. You will die. So this is a global environmental issue. It is also a huge education issue. So because what happens predominantly in Africa, some of the African countries, is it's the girls that have to go and fetch this water. So they are taken out of school to go and do that. The irony in all of this is that, particularly in some of the Maasai area where I've worked, is that when a young Maasai man becomes of age, then he gets an inheritance. He'll get some goats and he'll get some cattle and he'll get a little bit of land. And generally that makes him in that culture quite wealthy. So he doesn't have to work. So it's the women that do all the work. But here we have this enormous cycle, and I saw that before. Education fixes these things because it's the women who will work out, if we plant more crops than we need, we can sell that. If we start a small business selling some of our produce, that'll pay for my children's and that will give me a better future and a hope. But that doesn't happen. I was just walking through a village. This is the age that young girls are off collecting water. The front girl's about 4. They walked about 2 or 3 kilometres carrying water, and they start with a little 1 litre drink bottle, and as you can see, as they get older, they're expected to carry more and more. I don't think that's part of God's plan. And this is an enormous justice issue, because when these girls leave the village, in their village they're protected and they're safe. When they leave, they are subject to being attacked, to being raped, to all sorts of awful, awful things happening to them. But what happens when you put one well in one village, you transform that. This is an area in the Rift Valley in northern Tanzania. Now don't let the overcast day fool you. Think of the hottest day that you've ever experienced in Perth. The hottest, okay? That's this day. 45, 46 degrees, stinking hot. It was that hot. We're fixing this well, which it doesn't normally sit in a bunker, but this is the adversity some people face. This is a predominantly Christian village, and they built that bunker because time and time again, either the local witch doctor or the local Muslim community would come along at night, put a chain around the well, tie it to a 4-wheel drive and drive off and destroy it, because they didn't want Christians getting free, fresh water. That's a struggle. So that was so hot that the next day we drove for about 6 hours to get somewhere, and I drank 5 1-litre bottles of water and didn't have to go to the bathroom. That's how hot it was. And this is what I saw when I was there. This is the worst case I have ever seen in my life of someone fetching water. That lady is just coming back from a 34-kilometre walk. 17 kilometres there and then 17 back carrying, that's about 30 litres, about 30 kilos of water. And that's 45, 46 degrees. She left at 8 in the morning. This is about 4:30. Just so her family could survive for another day or two. And here's the really sad part. That's where she got the water from. So this is where cattle are in the water doing their business. People are in there washing, and they're collecting water in all those buckets in the hope that if they boil it once, it'll be fresh and clean and they'll survive. There was about 18 types of bacteria in that water. They took a sample and had it tested. This is another village that people are drinking that. That's their water source, so they're drinking that. You wouldn't wash your hands in it. When you put one well in one village, it is one of the great joys of life, being there and experiencing what it means. That's what a well looks like, and that's what a very cute Tanzanian girl looks like. This is what happens. People come and they celebrate. They dance, they rejoice. There is amazing joy in that moment because they realise that their life has been transformed. That love has reached out to them and brought change in their world. This is a really special moment for me. The lady in red is a lady called Julie Hepworth, who's the founder of Water for Africa. The lady she's hugging is an elder in that village. She has spent her entire life since she was 5 years old walking about 5 kilometres down a really steep hill and coming back up every day, about 4 times a day. We worked out that in her life, that lady has walked about 225,000 kilometres fetching water. And in this moment, she realised that her life's just changed. But see, more than that, she realised her daughter's life's changed. Her granddaughter's life's changed. This is tears of joy. This is what God's love looks like when it touches people. Now, when I was in Africa this last time, I thought I would tell the story we've just been talking about, that mums taking their children, fetching water. And then I thought, no, maybe I should tell this, and this is a well, or a water source rather, that in 2014 was an outbreak of a cholera epidemic that killed 2,000 people in one village. It's a village of 5,000, it killed 2,000, predominantly children, because they have no immunity. Now this water, look at it, has been deemed safe. Now, I took my underwater camera, I got in there only to about this depth. I did not put my head under, and I was sick for the next 2 days. I won't describe it, but everywhere is uncontrollable. It wasn't a good look. People are drinking this. And I thought, well, should I tell that story? But then something happened, and I had a deeply personal encounter. And I met a young girl called Halima. And her story is tragic. So Halima is a 15-year-old girl, and her dad had passed away when she was young. She lives in central Tanzania, in one of the poorest villages you'll ever come across. Until recently, they had no water. She lives with her 70-year-old grandmother and her mum. But 2 years ago, when she was 13, Halima had an awful, awful accident, and she fell into a fire. And she badly burnt her face and her neck and her hands. Halima's family was so poor that they could not afford the $3 bus ride to the hospital. Imagine that. Can you imagine? $3. It would have cost probably $50 to get treatment, but they couldn't afford that. So you know what happened? They did nothing. So I'm going to show you her image in a sec. So I met Halima, and at that point my heart is breaking. Here is this, she is the sweetest, kindest, gentlest 15-year-old girl you'll meet. And in that moment, you want to fix that, don't you? You want to do something, but you feel powerless and you feel hopeless. And in that moment, I sense God saying, this is the one. You see, I'm passionate and I want to help those 650 million people, but you can only do so much, yeah? But God put someone in front of me and went, this is the one to help. So here I am. I'm not a surgeon. I'm not a doctor. I don't know how to fix it. And I thought, well, all I can do is what God's given me, and that's a camera and the ability to tell a story. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to tell her story. So I took her photo and I went back that night, and through tears, I wrote Halima's story. And the next day I posted it. And this is what social media did, because I shared it across a few platforms, and I did something I never do. I asked people to share. If people like my work normally, that's great. If they don't, that's great. But I said, please help me share her story, and somehow maybe we can help her. So imagine your profile picture tomorrow. You wake up and it's described as, this photo may show violence or graphic content. This is what Halima sees in the mirror every morning. So it is confronting. I'm going to show it's confronting, but it's her reality. Okay? That's Halima. Don't let the outside confuse you, because she is the sweetest, most innocent, gorgeous girl you will hopefully meet. Then something happened. So I shared it. And people started sharing it, liking it, commenting. Hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. 7 days later, over 1 million people had seen Halima's story. See, when you reach out and you say, daughter, I want to help you. You belong. You're part of my tribe. We have to do something about this. I think God responds. So God reached out. Something incredible happened. A group contacted us and said, we have 2 of the finest plastic surgeons on the planet going to another part of Africa. If you can get Halima to Dar es Salaam, the capital of Tanzania, to the hospital, we'll go there and we'll fix her. 45 days later, 45 days, you couldn't get that appointment in Perth. 45 days later, these are 2 of the best plastic surgeons, one from Australia, one from the UK, operating on Halima. And that's her the very next day. Wow. How good is God? How amazing is God? You see, Halima's scars and her brokenness are on the outside. Yeah? And God reached down and said, daughter, somehow I want to help you. And he did the miraculous. See, we might look at Jairus' story and go, well, that was 2,000 years ago. Jesus was there. It was a different circumstance. I'm not sure if I believe in the miraculous. There's a 15-year-old girl in Tanzania who believes in a God of the miraculous. So look, her scars are obvious for everyone to see. They've gone back since then, by the way, and done some more work on her hands. And they're transforming. They're setting her free by doing that work. But for some of us, our scars are on the inside, that we have been damaged, that we've had things happen that are not fair, that are not part of God's plan. And God's standing there reaching out his hand, saying, son, daughter, my child. And it's up to us to respond to that. Would you pray with me? Father God, I thank you that you are a God that loves us deeply, that cares deeply for us as individuals, that reaches out that loving, caring hand and says, son, daughter, come to me, I'll restore you. Come to me, I'll set you free. Come to me and I will transform you, that I can take that brokenness, that hurt, that abuse, and I can start a new journey with you.
Just keep your heads bowed and your eyes closed for just a moment. The wonderful thing about the love of God is it is just so vast. The Bible says it's so high and so wide and so deep that it's impossible for the human mind to fully comprehend it. It's a profound and beautiful thought that the love of God moves the heart of God to care about the most intimate details of our lives. God cares about everything from your eternal destiny to your daily bread. He cares about the things that keep you up at night. He cares about the quality of water people drink. He cares about the air we breathe, and he cares about the fears we hold in our heart. The love of God covers every aspect of human life. And there is nothing more life-changing than to be on the receiving end of God's love. As Steve so rightly said, for Halima, her brokenness, her scar is on the outside of her body. But for so many human beings, their brokenness is on the inside of their hearts. And the Bible tells us that God, through his son Jesus, broke into our world. As light penetrates the darkness, he came into our reality. He came down to our fallen world. And he came to show us what true love is. And he came to reach into our lives to bring hope and to bring healing and to bring restoration and to bring deliverance and to transform the human heart from the inside out. And it's possible that tonight, as you're sitting here in your seat, you may have never experienced the transforming love of God like that in your life or in your heart. It's possible that maybe you've come along tonight, maybe you've come with a friend, maybe you've come along with a family member, maybe you walked in the doors on your own, but as you're sitting there in your seat right now, you know that as far as your journey through life is concerned, you've never encountered the love of God in that way. But something about what you heard tonight, about God, about his love, about his commitment to the one has resonated so deeply with you. And when you heard that word, daughter, it resonated because it was not a man speaking to you, it was the voice of your Heavenly Father. Maybe you're a son. Maybe you're a daughter. Whatever the case, know that tonight your Heavenly Father loves you with an everlasting and eternal love.